Hey everyone, it's Matt from ZenShop, and I wanted to make a video today replying to a comment in the previous video. A chap asked me, why did I use Flutter instead of React Native? So I thought it was a fantastic question, so I'm going to try and answer that for you. I also had a comment actually on my LinkedIn from a friend called Foxy, so there's a shout out to him. I'm going to create a dev diary actually. I think we got 74 subscribers on the YouTube channel. I think a lot of you guys who are subscribing are interested in the journey of ZenShop. So that's kind of why I created this channel, and really happy that you're here with me. So I'm actually going to create a dev diary, and this will allow you to follow some writing that I'll do about the topics that we're talking about in the YouTube channel. And I'm going to try and be a little bit more structured in how I talk about the topics in these further videos, so I'm not so verbose. In the final part of this video, actually, I'm going to just talk about some of the plans that I have for improving the apps and some of the recent updates that I've done to the apps. Explain to you the challenges that I'm getting shipping, multiple apps on different platforms. All right, okay. So with that out of the way, the original question: why am I using Flutter instead of React Native? All right, okay. So as you know, the web app was built in React, right? It still is actually. I haven't actually shipped the web version of the Flutter apps yet. Users still using the React app. And I'm obviously familiar with React, and I love it to pieces. Really, really big champion of React and JavaScript. But of course, I've settled now on building Flutter apps. I think personally, if you're considering React Native, it's very, very good candidate for building mobile apps in particular, because this is the original goal of React Native, is to bridge the gap between Android and iOS. So you don't need to necessarily write two applications. You can write one React Native application. And I think most people would agree it works quite well. You can build a React Native app. It can look fully native on both those different platforms, and you can have a single code base. But in my case, and in ZenShop's case in general, ZenShop's ambitions are a little bit more than just mobile. We're talking about desktop, as you can see in front of me. We're talking about web. So that includes essentially 5 different platforms. And React Native, I don't think, is a very good candidate for that type of problem. And I'll explain why. So the main strength of React Native is also sort of main drawback, in my opinion. The strength of React Native is that it uses native elements. But its drawback, when you're considering more platforms, is that those elements might not be there, right? And you can't reliably call them on all those different platforms. If I was going to use a single code base in React Native, I'd need to sort of consider something like React Native Web as well. A lot of the packages that you use within your mobile and desktop apps, they might not necessarily be available to you in the web version. And of course, all the buttons and the interface elements are going to be different on each different platform because they're calling into native elements. You can, of course, style all these elements, or you can use sort of generic looking elements, but then you kind of lose the benefits, I think, of what React Native provides you. That's why I haven't used React Native, because Flutter, on the other hand, has a very different approach in building applications. You build applications with libraries like Cupertino and Material or Fluent, and those provide you a recreation of the native widget libraries that you'd get in iOS and Android and Windows and Mac OS. But they're not tied to that platform in the same way that React Native is. I can build a Cupertino app potentially, have it run on Android, and I can also have it run on Mac OS and Windows. So the extent of how I make it look native is very much determined by me and how much effort I'm willing to put in recreating the native experience on all those individual platforms. So what I have done so far with ZenShop is I've used a mixture of macOS UI and Cupertino to build a very Apple-like experience on mobile and desktop. So what that meant is that the Android app looks very similar to an iOS app, and that's not ideal. You know, of course, I don't want Android users thinking that they've got some rip-off of an Apple app. But what it does allow me to do in this first version of the apps is ship apps across both platforms, have it run very much the same, and then give me the flexibility of later down the road I can then implement Material UI for Android, for example, and then Cupertino UI for iOS. And I can use something called platform widgets, which allow me to basically call a single kind of widget, which then renders a little bit differently on different platforms. And of course, I can have some forking in the code base to render in something that's not possible to do that platform UI, but I can call material animations in Android and have Cupertino animations in iOS and so on. For Windows, actually, I found that the macOS UI is actually quite suitable. You know, it doesn't obviously look perfectly like a Windows app, but it doesn't look too outlandish either. So I'm reasonably happy with the Windows app. I think I haven't really found any particular area that it's glaringly obvious that it's actually a Mac app. I've got the Windows buttons in the right places, and I make some adjustments to how the app looks in Windows, because obviously you've got the title bar at the top, and Mac OS UIs, you typically have lots of buttons within that area, and I don't think it necessarily works quite the same in Windows, just by the fact that you have the close, maximize, and minimize buttons on the right hand side rather than the left hand side. So I would definitely say that Flutter is a really good choice if you're building applications across lots of different areas and platforms, whereas React Native is a really good option if you're extending into mobile, you know, and you've got a really good React app on the website and you're happy to keep that as it is, and then you want to bring in a new app for mobile. Whereas Flutter will let you build a consistent experience across lots of different platforms. Okay, so one concern that you might have if you're a React developer that you're really considering building Flutter applications is the architecture of it, right? Flutter apps can be architected quite differently from a React app. But what I found is actually there are ways of building a Flutter app which are very compatible with how you'd build it in React. So I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of my terrible code in Flutter. And I've got my text editor open here. And this is actually the compose message component or widget for ZenShop. And what you'll notice is there are some things here which are very familiar to you in the React world. So we've got use state, we've got use callback and use effect. So all those little hooks that you see, of course, are very similar to what you'd build with React, and they're available to you in Flutter via a package called Flutter hooks. So for state management side of things, which is actually often quite a complicated area to deal with, if you want to, you can use hooks. And personally, I found that a fantastic way of building all the state management within the app. There's one area which is a little bit different, but actually I think largely quite the same. Provider pattern. So for the theme, particularly, and the authentication logic, I use provider, and I believe that would be analogous to the context API in React, and you can think of it like that. With theming as well, React apps tend to use sort of CSS in JS. Kind of like the same with the theme in many ways. You can set colors and text styles and so on via a theme, basically, and you theme the widgets based on stuff that you set up within this theme object here. So I'm really, really happy with Flutter. Definitely think you should consider it a lot. And I really think it's got advantages over React Native when you're extending outside of just mobile. So that's hopefully answered your question as best I could. If you have any more questions, shoot them and I'll try and answer them. Okay, so I can't really talk much about the next topic, which is the dev diary, so I haven't even started it yet. But I'm going to give you an update shortly when I write an article or something, create the web page, and also collate all these videos and things in a better way. So that will probably be in a future update for you guys. And the final part of the video, I want to talk about some of the stuff that I'm working on ZenShop, some of the approaches that I'm doing with it to enhance it. So one of the releases that I did recently was I enabled push notifications. Right, so I was super excited by this because it's a really great update to leverage the native experience that we're building. Because it's kind of a challenge to build push notifications in a web browser consistently. Has been for a long time anyway. But we've got it going in the Flutter app quite fast. So you can go to the settings and you can see this little toggle here. You can also do it in the mobile app too. Hold on, where is it? Sorry, there you go. So yeah, so these behave the same. You know, you toggle this. It will then go and grab a token, send it off to my API, and then we'll be able to send push notifications to you whenever something happens in your help desk. So I'm really excited by that. And what's also possible now is you can click on one of those push notifications, and it will take you into the corresponding part of the app. So, for example, if a new message is updated within a conversation, you can click on that push notification and it will go into the relevant conversation. Awesome. So I've done that, as I mentioned, for iOS and macOS. We've got an update coming shortly for Android because it's not that difficult to port that functionality as well to Android. And I've also got it coming for Windows. Now, Windows was the outlier here, unfortunately, because the library I'm using, which is Firebase Cloud Messaging, so I'm not using their database, I'm just using the cloud messaging stuff. The cloud messaging isn't available on Windows Desktop yet, or at least it's not fully supported. So what I'm going to do is another update to ZenShop, which is going to enable this real-time updates. So I think I mentioned in the past, one of the exciting areas that I was very happy about in the web app was I was using GraphQL subscriptions. And it's had a lot of promise for achieving the goal of what I wanted, which was having a user interface reflect the data in the back end fast, right? And that's happening via WebSocket, basically. But what I found was, in reality, the WebSocket would often die, or get out of sync or something, and it just it wouldn't. The front end would no longer know about changes in the back end. So what I've thought about is, rather than try and solve this myself, you know, and spend a lot of time probably diagnosing WebSocket issues, is leverage other tools out there that have actually solved this already, right? So I don't want to have to, like, this is the approach I take a lot on with anything, honestly. It's like, if I can pay for it, I'll use it rather than building it myself, because it's just too much time. You know, I'd end up spending much time building stuff and never shipping features, right? So I'm thinking the solution could be I'm going to use Superbase for offloading certain parts of the real-timeness of ZenShop. So Superbase is sort of like a backend as a service, and I don't want to use it entirely. So all the data and stuff is going to remain where it is in the database, in the API, and I'm also going to improve the API and get it faster shortly. I'll explain that in a minute. But for getting real-time updates, I can use Superbase because it also has a Flutter library as well, which looks really awesome. And what it can do is I can basically make a connection between the front end, a Superbase instance, and the back end. And basically, whenever something changes in the back end that's pertinent to this user, like for example, this message is updated, or some labels have changed on a conversation, or a new notification has arrived, and so on, I can inform Superbase of a certain topic. So I'm going to just create little topics basically that the clients can subscribe to, and I'm just going to store like a number, right? So I'm not going to store any actual data in those streams. It's just going to be like some random number. And whenever that number changes, the client then knows that something's changed, and then it can then pull more data from the back end related to that topic. So it won't be able to like stream in the data straight away, because there's going to be an additional request to the back end. But if I make those queries as well faster in the API, so for example, this list of conversation messages that I've got here, right? So I'm going to show you. Yeah, that's the kind of general speed that we're getting currently in the timeline. It's not. This is actually the slowest part of the app. It's also the most important part of the app, is just fetching the messages in the conversation. So it's an area that I'm really keen to improve. So we're basically going to subscribe to a topic. Hey, you know, this message conversation, and if a new message arrives, backend will say, Superbase, changes have happened, inform your clients. And then the clients pick it up, and then they refresh the data. But the refresh query also needs to be faster. So what I realized is so I'm not a backend expert, but I think this is actually one of the low-hanging fruits that I can solve. It's an N+1 problem. So there's lots of data within this timeline that's actually being requested over and over and over and over and over again. And each time those queries get made, it costs more time. So if I can solve that, then this timeline will be really, really fast. And that's what I want. I really want this timeline particularly to be super, super quick, so that the information is displayed with immediacy. And I really want ZenShop to be a very fast help desk, because we've got these awesome native apps. We've got the ability to create beautiful experiences with lots of animation, potentially, or, you know, not just over animation, but just really like beautiful transitions between screens and buttons reacting, you know, fluidly. And I want the data coming back from the API to be fast. So that's possible, I think, with this approach. And of course, when I get live chat going, I need to make sure that the live chat is really, really quick. So these are the steps I'm taking preemptively to enable live chat also being a really good experience. Yeah, so that's where I'm at with ZenShop right now. And I'm gonna explain and share more videos with you as I go on those topics. Really, really excited to have people join and subscribe to the channel. You're going to follow along what I'm doing on ZenShop. I've got big plans over the next year, building really awesome features for ZenShop, and you can see as I go what I'm doing on those things. Yeah, so until then, another video for you shortly. See you soon. Bye.